Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bethany Connect Convocation Series. I'm Amy Van Horn, the Director of the Office of Career and Professional Development at Bethany College. Sharon Betty Preszler is our speaker today, and she'll be talking about her career in the Air Force before opening up the panel to questions from students about careers in the armed forces. And first, I want to say thank you, Betty, for your service. I also want to take a moment to recognize and thank our students who volunteered to be panelists, as well as Celeste Marchbanks, who is the student panelist organizer for this event. Thank you. And I want to thank Paisley Travis, Haley Viziak, Eden Rice, Julianne Latinsky, Desiree Podgorski, Victoria Magnotti, Marcy Meza, Carly Trinidad, Louis Banks, and Celeste Marchbanks again. So let me tell you all a little bit about Betty. When I began looking for a lector, I wanted someone that represented a company or an agency where all different types of majors could possibly find a job. And the military seemed like an avenue not often taken, but with vast opportunity. I decided to try and find someone within the military community that could shine a light on potential career paths that perhaps students had never thought about. And during my search, I discovered an organization called Athena's Voice, in which Betty is one of 8 female speakers, which works in nicely with Women's History Month. And I actually had a difficult time deciding on which speaker, but after reading Betty's page, I knew she would be perfect. Celeste will tell you a little bit more about her, and then we will hear from Betty, followed by a Q&A session with students. As a viewer, the Q&A function is open to submit questions, which Celeste will monitor and then relay to Betty for you. So with that, Celeste, will you please introduce Betty? Please take yourself off of mute.
Sorry. Welcome, Betty, and thank you, students and viewers, for joining us today. It is my honor to continue Betty's introduction, which I've taken from her webpage, as told by her. Sharon Betty Preszler was handpicked as one member of the initial cadre of women fighter pilots in the United States Air Force. She was the first woman to fly the F-16, a single-seat, single-engine fighter, and the first woman to fly combat missions and instruct in the F-16. Sharon has over 1,300 hours in the F-16, including over 50 combat hours in Iraq and 1 ejection due to electrical failure. In her 20-plus years of service in the U.S. Air Force, she was also a navigator, piloted a Learjet, and spent time in the North American Aerospace Defense Command, writing our homeland defense plans after the terrorist attacks on 9/11, plans that are still in use today. After retiring from the Air Force in 2006, Sharon went to work for Southwest Airlines, where she flew over 9,000 hours in a Boeing 737. She recently retired as captain from Southwest Airlines.
Well, thank you, Celeste. Good morning, everyone. All great fighter pilot stories start with, there I was. And mine is no different. There I was on my first airplane ride. I'm 4 years old. And the clouds look all solid, but we fly through them and they're all fuzzy inside. After the sun sets, the stewardesses, yeah, that's what we used to call them back then, they asked me if I want to go up to the cockpit. We could do that back then as well. They take me up front, and when the cockpit door opens, I am looking out over the Atlantic Ocean on a moonless night. It looks like there's a billion stars in the sky, and I am breathless. I am so excited, I go running back to my mom. Mommy, I want to be a stewardess. And to her credit, Mom, who was born in the 40s and raised when women were expected to stay home with their families, she looked at me and said, you might want to think about being a pilot. So I did. I didn't start out at Southwest Airlines. I started in the United States Air Force. there I was in an auditorium full of my fellow ROTC cadets. I'm a junior in college, and today is the day. Today is the day we'll learn the results of the Central Selection Board for all the women cadets in ROTC. Today is the day I'll find out if I get to go to pilot training. I've been waiting for this day, but now that it's here, I almost don't want to know the answer. There were 350 women cadets that met that Central Selection Board, and they gave out 11 pilot slots and 16 navigator slots. That means I only have a 3% chance of getting to pilot training. What if they say no? And then I hear, Cadet Preszler, would you please stand up? I stand up and I listen as the colonel says, Cadet Preszler is one of 16 women nationwide selected to attend navigator training after graduation. Congratulations. And he said it like it was such a good thing. I knew I should be thankful. I knew I should be happy for the opportunity. But I didn't want to be a navigator. I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to fly the plane, not give directions. But this is the military. So I put on my brave face. I accepted the congratulations from my fellow cadets. And I started wrapping my head around the fact that I was going to be a navigator. But I wasn't going to give up on my dream. I just knew I had to find a way to convince the Air Force to send me to pilot training. And how do you convince someone to give you an opportunity to do something different or maybe something better? You do the absolute best you can at whatever it is they've asked you to do in the first place. And that's what I did. I went to navigator training and I graduated in the top of my class. I showed up to my first assignment and I worked super hard. I was going to be the best navigator I could be. And in my free time, I was going to be a pilot. I took some extra money that I had from now having a paying job, and I learned how to fly a Cessna 152. Being up in that airplane was beautiful and quiet and peaceful, and it just made me more determined to get the Air Force to send me to pilot training. Well, they have selection boards once a year to select people to train from whatever they're doing in the Air Force then to go to pilot training. I applied to that first selection board, and my squadron leadership, they were so supportive of me, they were sure I was going to get selected. So I was crushed when I got told no again. It was 4 years after that day in the auditorium when I first got told no. I had worked so hard. I'd done everything I was supposed to do. How could I have failed? I complained to my husband. I sulked around at work and at home. I even quit flying. But after a couple of months, I knew I had to get back in the air. I went back flying, and I just knew that's where I should be. So I decided to keep trying, and I applied to the next board a year later. And this time, they said yes. I was going to pilot training. I had gotten the opportunity I worked so hard for. It was 1992 when I graduated from pilot training. At that point, women were not allowed into combat roles, so I was not allowed to choose to fly the F-16. It was prohibited by law. Yet there I was, on my way to the Pentagon to meet with General Bowles, the guy in charge of all personnel in the Air Force. And I sat in his office with Jeannie Flynn and Martha McSally while General Bowles told us the combat exclusion for women had been lifted. Jeannie was going to go fly the F-15E. Martha, she was going to go fly the A-10. And me, I was going to go fly the F-16. I was so excited. I wanted to jump for joy, but I didn't think the general would like that so much. So I just said, yes, sir. But inside, I couldn't believe it. I was going to get to fly the Viper. Single seat, single engine. It's got that cool bubble canopy, that huge engine inlet. It is a 9G machine, and it was going to be mine. I was so excited. But guess what? I realized that if I would have gone to pilot training right after college, or even if I would have gotten picked up on that first selection board when I was a navigator, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have gotten to go to General Bull's office that day. I never would have gotten to fly the F-16 because my timing would have been all wrong. After that day in General Bull's office, the next day we had a press conference to introduce the three of us as some of the initial cadre to fly fighters in the U.S. Air Force. I was excited about my opportunity, but I really could have done without the dog and pony show. At the podium was General McPeak, the Chief of Staff in the Air Force, the #1 guy, who was also a fighter pilot. And 6 months earlier had told the world, I would rather fly with a less qualified man on my wing than a woman. Really, sir? You're really not setting us up for success with words like that. But luckily for me, the military does what its civilian leadership tells it to. And the next thing I know, I'm on CNN and the Today Show, talking to people about what I think it would be like to fly the F-16. And they have questions. So, Captain Preszler, how do you think you'll be received by your fellow fighter pilot? Oh, honey, do you really think you could shoot something or drop bombs on something? And my favorite. So, young lady, how do you plan to deal with the animosity of your fellow fighter pilots who don't think women should be flying fighters? Wait a minute, what? You mean General McPeak wasn't the only guy who didn't think this was a good idea? I'd been so focused on my opportunity, I hadn't thought about the battle I had ahead of me, about how tough it was going to be to succeed. Well, after the media circus, I went home. I went home and I had some time on my hands. And I started to have doubts. I doubted whether I had made the right decision in deciding to be the first woman to fly the F-16. I started doubting myself. I knew I was going to have to make a choice. Am I going to step up and take advantage of this opportunity I'm given? Or am I going to listen to that little voice of self-doubt chattering in my ear, trying to sabotage my success? How do I quiet that voice of self-doubt? I listen to people who know and respect me. I talk to a mentor, my family, my friends. In this case, my family and friends were super supportive, but they're my family and friends. So I wanted another perspective. I called one of my instructor pilots from pilot training who had flown the F-16. I was waiting for him to come to the phone and I just couldn't help but think, I wonder, is he going to support me or is he going to sound kind of like General McPeak did? Ed got to the phone. Sharon, I am so excited for you. You are going to do great. Here's someone who knew what I was capable of, who knows how I fly. And he supported me. What a boost to my confidence. I will tell you that fighter pilots are known for brutally honest debriefs. We will go fly for an hour and we'll come back and we'll talk about it for 2 or 3 hours, looking at video and finding every single mistake we made. And we do that so we can get some lessons learned from each flight, so we can be better the next time. Well, since I learned how to debrief like a fighter pilot, I do the same thing in my life. When something impactful happens to me, I take the time to look at it and find the things I did well, find the mistakes I made, and find a lesson to take forward. So what's the lesson going forward? What's the debrief from this time period between the press conference and actually going to training? Well, the biggest mistake I made was I let myself get inside my own head. I listened to that voice of self-doubt. But I handled it. I talked to friends and family. I talked to a mentor. And that helps quiet my voice of self-doubt. I don't know about you guys, but even at my age with all I've accomplished, that little voice of self-doubt never seems to go away. But I'm able to push it to the back of my head where it doesn't really have an effect on me. And when it starts to creep forward, I think about the support I have and the confidence my mentors have in me, and I push it back again. And that's the lesson from this period. If you can learn how to quiet your voice of self-doubt, you're going to be able to step up and take advantage of any opportunity you're given with confidence. There I was, 4 years later. I'm in training for the F-16, flying air-to-air combat over the Arizona desert. It was, in this case, we're dogfighting. 2 of us versus 1 bad guy. It was my favorite part of training until it wasn't. All right, I can do this. I can do it. I know I can. I just got to shoot the bad guy, save my flight lead. Okay. Lights on, one's engaged. 2's out west. All right, keep him in sight. Keep him in sight. Build some space. Wait for the defensive call. 1's defensive. 2's in. I turn in. I just got to, where are they? I don't see them. I got to find them. 2's blind. 1 knock it off. 2 knock it off. It's a cardinal sin to lose sight of your flight lead. Walking back to the squadron after that flight couldn't take long enough. Anything to postpone my debrief. And then my instructor walked in with my grade sheet with a big red border around it. And I knew I had failed again. I was going to get 1 more chance to get this flight right. 1 more chance or I was done with the F-16, washed out of training. It was then that I realized that even if I did wash out, I was going to leave with my head held high, knowing I had done my absolute best. I gave myself permission to fail, and that made it easier to succeed. I quit worrying about all the things I couldn't control, like what people thought about me or what they were saying about me, or even if I was good enough. And I focused solely on my performance, the one thing I could control. And that old saying, those who matter don't mind, and those who mind don't matter, that became my new mantra. I focused on my performance and I let everything else go. And I felt better. I was a lot more relaxed when I went to go fly again. All right, hopefully this is not my last flight in F-16. I can do this, I know I can. Lights on, 1's engaged. 2's out east. All right, keep him in sight this time. Gotta keep him in sight. Gotta shoot the bad guy, save the flight lead. 1's defensive. 2's in. I turn in. Ah, there they are. I see everything perfectly. I shoot the bad guy, I save my flight lead. I pass my proficiency ride. I'm moving on to dropping bombs. Yes. But after that flight, I talked to some of the other guys in my class, and I learned that that was the hardest part of training for everyone. That is the part of F-16 training where the most people wash out. I had no idea. I was so focused on my own struggles that I didn't notice what was going on with everyone else. I mean, they looked fine when I passed them in the hallway. To me, this is the 1994 version of social media. Everyone looks great on their Instagram feed, but inside they were struggling too. So what's a debrief? Staring failure in the face for me? What mistakes did I make? I listened to people who didn't really support me, and I focused on things I couldn't control. The lesson to take forward is to always focus on what you can control and only listen to those who support you and care about you. You can't do anything about what people post about you or say about you. You can only control your responses and your actions. Focus on what you can control and listen to those who care about you. There I was, back at Luke Air Force Base, this time for F-16 training, but I'm the instructor. Now, I was the only woman pilot on a base with over 250 fighter pilots. So I would get that I'm in the spotlight kind of feeling every once in a while, but none sticks out in my mind more than this day. I was heading back to the base, and I had a little tiny electrical problem. It's not a big deal. I get out my checklist, I start doing what I'm supposed to do, but it just keeps getting worse. It keeps snowballing. And then I lost my radios. I couldn't talk to anyone. And I didn't know what else I would lose next because despite the fact that the F-16 had flown for over 8 million flight hours, this emergency had never happened before. So now I'm totally alone. I've got no checklist to give me guidance, and I can't talk to anybody about what to do. I decide to continue back to Luke Air Force Base and land. As I approach the runway, I put the landing gear down, and I hear them go clunk, clunk, clunk. But I don't get the 3 green lights I should get that tell me my gear are down and locked safely. Well, I heard them drop down, so I decide I'm going to land anyway. I'm going to have to land sometime. I mean, I only have so much gas. As I get closer to the runway, I just remember thinking, I hope nothing else goes wrong. I land, my landing gear worked fine. I lower the nose gently on the runway, and I step on the brakes, and my feet just go straight to the floor without slowing me down at all. Now, we actually have a procedure for this. So I change brake channels and I try again. Nothing. I turn the anti-skid off and I try again. Nothing. I try engaging the parking brake. I might blow some tires, but at least I'll stop the airplane. Nothing. So I put the hook down, hoping I can catch the cable at the end of the runway, kind of like on an aircraft carrier. Oh, look, my hook light isn't working either, but maybe my hook's still down. I pass the first cable, nothing. Second cable, nothing. Now I'm approaching the dirt at the end of the runway at 70 miles an hour. I do what I've been taught from my very first day flying F-16. I pull the ejection handle. Let me tell you what it's like to eject from an F-16. You are literally sitting on a rocket motor. Have you ever seen one of the launches of a big rocket into space? It's like that, but just a little bit smaller. I pull the handle. It seems to take forever, but it's really only a second. And I can see the smoke billowing around my feet, black and gray, coming up. And I smell the cordite, think like a fireworks smell. And then I feel myself start moving up as the seat takes me out of the airplane and into the air. Now, as that seat accelerates, I'm subjected to 13 times the normal gravitational force. That makes everything in my body feel like it weighs 13 times what it normally does. Imagine your head weighing 130 pounds. But the real problem is my heart is trying to pump blood that weighs 13 times what it normally does. And it's not that good at that. So as I accelerate, my heart is unable to keep enough blood in my brain for my vision to work, and I can't see anything. That was pretty scary for me, even though it only lasted a second, and then I could see everything. I felt myself getting pushed away from the seat as the parachute opened. I felt the opening shock, and I looked up. I had a good parachute. At least something is working right today. And then I looked down and I saw my airplane. It was racing across the ground. It looked like it was going even faster than when I got out. Well, that distracted me. And my parachute landing fall, the way they taught us to land after an ejection so you have a nice little roll and you don't hurt yourself. Yeah, I didn't do anything like that. I landed on my feet, went right back onto my rear end, and then smacked my head against the ground. I landed hard. My friends who saw me said I bounced. Now, I don't remember bouncing, but I did hit hard enough to crack my tailbone. And my jet, it kept going. It hit a little dirt berm and it got airborne all by itself. And it drug a bunch of chain link fence across the public road on the northern edge of the airfield and landed in a farmer's field. The cockpit I had been in just moments before was totally demolished. My $25 million jet, yeah, it was a total loss. And I was left there, sitting on my rear end in the dirt, wondering what just happened. Talk about the spotlight. And talk about being scared. By the time they got me in the ambulance, my heart rate was over 180 beats per minute. Of all the things I'd worried about, all the challenges I'd overcome to become an F-16 pilot, I never really worried about my safety while I was flying. That may seem crazy if you've never flown a fighter, but we are so well trained and our maintenance is so good It just wasn't a factor for me until that day when I was sitting in the dirt. It was 11 days later and I was medically cleared to fly again. But emotionally, I'm not sure I was ready. I was still a little traumatized by how my last flight ended. So I thought about it. I thought about how hard I had worked and how much I loved flying the F-16. I thought about the look on my husband's face when he saw me in the emergency room and how my mom and dad felt when they heard I ejected. I thought about my friends who had ejected successfully and those who didn't. And I thought about fighter pilot bravado and how we are never, ever afraid of anything. I knew I had a choice to make. I was going to have to go out there and fly, or I was going to have to give up something I love and had worked hard for. And what it came down to for me was that my family still supported me. And at the end of the day, my ejection seat worked. My training worked. I was able to handle a unique emergency and walk away in one piece. I was a little battered, but I survived without serious injury. So what's the debrief from that day that I totaled a $25 million airplane? Well, I made the right decision to eject, and I made the right decision to go fly again. What lesson did I learn? I learned how to develop my courage. I learned that you can develop your courage by thinking consciously and logically about whatever it is you're a little concerned about. So the next time you face a decision that has you worried or concerned or maybe even a little scared, take a step back. Think about it logically. Think about what your risks are and what are the rewards. What are you going to gain if you go for it? Or what's going to happen if you listen to your fear? Give yourself credit for all the things you have accomplished so far in your life and all the courage you've shown, especially in this last year. And then you decide for yourself, are you going to develop your courage? Now, I know a lot of you are at places in your life where you have decisions to make. Well, I will tell you that I learned so many things in the military that transitioned to my everyday life. I learned about leadership and resiliency. I learned about attention to detail and following through on commitments. I learned to appreciate that sometimes not getting exactly what you want when you want it can be a good thing. Now, I know you guys have decisions to make, and if I can answer any questions that will help you, I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Betty. That very inspiring. Let's start with our students. Paisley, would you like to go first and ask Betty a question?
Sure. Betty, can you discuss an obstacle you had to face during your time in the military, and how did you overcome that obstacle?
Sure. I mean, the biggest obstacle that I had to face was related to being the first woman to fly the F-16. There were actually a lot of fighter pilots and a lot of people who didn't think women should go do that. So I had to overcome that. And the way I chose to overcome it was to kind of just put my head down and do my job, right? I just tried to do the best, be the best wingman and the best fighter pilot I could be. And I really used that saying. I know it sounds kind of corny, but those who matter don't mind, and those who mind don't matter. Because we all get to decide who gets inside our heads, whose opinions we listen to. So I just quit listening to the people that were the naysayers. And I focused on my performance and let it speak for me. And I was accepted into the community. I have great friends from my very first F-16 assignment that are like family to me today. So I think the key for me was really performance and not listening to people. You know, don't listen to the haters who are always willing to tell you no, because there's plenty out there.
Betty, I'm sort of curious if you had a repeat of obstacles once you became an instructor. Was it different obstacles or sort of the same?
Well, no, it was occasionally. I mean, one of my favorite things about that assignment was when people show up to F-16 training, they're all starry-eyed and they're excited, right? And they're brand new. And for them to see me as an instructor pilot already, I was better than them. So they were more accepting of me in that role. I did occasionally I have one funny story. If we have the time for it. We're at the Officers Club on a Friday night, you know, kind of like what you see in Top Gun, but maybe not quite that crazy. And this young lieutenant, I'm in uniform with all my badges and patches on that basically in the military, your patches tell people exactly what you do and who you are. And this young lieutenant comes up to me and he says, "So what do you do in the Top Dogs?" And I looked at my patches and I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, what do you do? Are you like the flight surgeon or something?" I was not very happy. So I looked at him and I said, "Hey, why don't you go over and ask, you're in the 63rd? Okay, go ask Governor and Duke Boy over there. Why don't you go ask him what Betty does in the Top Dogs? And then after they tell you, you come back and talk to me." Right? So he went over there and they told him I was an instructor pilot and he needed to watch his mouth because he's a brand new guy. And he came back over very sheepishly bringing me a beer and apologized. So yes, there were still those instances, but I had spent 4 years building credibility and the respect of my peers in F-16. So you still ran into people that were jerks, but you're going to run into people that are jerks no matter what you do in life, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Our next student is Haley. You have a question for Betty?
Yeah, I do. I was going to ask the question, what would you advise the women here about going against the status quo?
I would advise everyone, the women and men, to do what they want to do, whether it adheres to the status quo or not. Going against the status quo is difficult. So you don't want to do it, just to be a rebel. You want to do it for something you love. And then if you have something you want to do that is not the norm for a woman, then do it anyway. There will always be people telling you no, but that doesn't mean you can't follow your dream, no matter what it is.
Thank you, Haley. And thank you, Betty. Our next student is Eden.
Hi, Betty. I just wanted to start off by thanking you for your service. And I had a question. Do you think that the military is a good choice for graduating college students, particularly for loan forgiveness, or if that's actually something that they want to go into after they graduate?
Sure. I'm not sure that the military does loan forgiveness, but they do have quite a few scholarships for undergraduate students, even if you're in your last year or two. So you could maybe get help that way. And they also provide money for graduate school. I'm doing a master's now after having retired from the Air Force that my VA benefit is paying for. So there's other benefits as well. I think, obviously I stayed in 20 years and I got to do my dream job, right? So I think the military was a great thing. But I have friends who went in who just stayed for 4 years, which is, I think, still the minimum commitment. And the things that you learn there, you will be somewhere else than your hometown. So that's a good experience, right? You get out, you see a different part of the country or a different part of the world. You learn a lot about self-discipline, working as part of a team. And no matter what career field you're in, you're going to build experience that then will make you more marketable when you leave the military, right? Your resume is going to look good after 4 years in the military. And I mean, realistically, I think everybody that I know that runs their own business loves to hire vets, because guess what? We show up on time, right? On time is late, 5 minutes early is on time. That's how the military works. We show up for work, we do what we're supposed to do, and we work hard. So yeah, I think it's a great place to start, even if you don't want to make it a career.
Thank you.
Our next student is Julianne.
Hi. So as you've discussed, breaking barriers in society tends to be a tough thing to do. What words of advice would you say to people trying to break barriers for positive change?
Yeah, it is tough. It's going to be tough. It's not going to be easy. But if it's something you're passionate about and something you believe in, then it'll be worth the effort. The key is to find the way that works to break whatever barrier it is you're trying to do. And in most cases, it will come down to your performance, I think. For other people to respect you in whatever it is you're doing, you have to be good at it, right? There's always going to be those people who, no matter how good you are, they aren't going to give you the respect you deserve, right? You just okay boomer them and you keep going, right? And you find people that are willing to at least give you a chance, right? I was just visiting with a friend of mine from my Air Force days that I worked for in my first assignment, and I was his deputy. He was the chief of safety. I was the deputy chief. I didn't know it at the time, but he was coming to Spangdahlem thinking, please just don't let me have to work with that woman fighter pilot. For goodness sakes, I do not want to have anything to do with her, right? But I couldn't tell that when he showed up because he was professional. And guess what? We became friends. He has a lot of respect for me and what I did, right? Because he was at least willing to give me a chance. And if you're going to go out there and break barriers, in addition to not listening to people that don't support you and being good at what you do, you really need to focus your energies on the people that are willing to give you a chance, right? Because then those people, when they build respect for you, you kind of get that momentum going, right? And in my experience, you know, when my squadron had a lot of respect for me as a fighter pilot, when we would go somewhere else and other squadrons would go, blah, 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 woman fighter pilot, they'd go, hey, she's pretty good. You should go fight her if you're going to talk about her, right? Fighting an airplane, not fist fight, but, and they would pass that on and they would protect me from those other people who were still, I'll say ignorant, because they were still ignorant of what women could do in a jet. So yeah, just really work with the people who are going to give you a chance first and then use that to build. And then the only other thing I would say is, and I had to fight this a lot, so that's why I'm saying it, is I had to work really, really hard to give people the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes people say things that they don't have any idea how it comes across. Sometimes people are just having a bad day. So I would often, if I ran into somebody that I thought was just, I was worried about, and this, I'll give you an experience from my time at Southwest Airlines. I flew a 3-day trip with a captain, and the guy was like, he didn't say 2 words to me that weren't in the checklist, where normally we chat and have discussion and talk about your kids or your new car or whatever's going on. Not a word. So by day 3, I feel like going, dude, what is your problem? Why aren't you, why don't you like women pilots? What is your deal? And I didn't. I bit my tongue and I thought, I'm going to go talk to my friends first. And I talked to a few good friends of mine at Southwest Airlines, and they said, yeah, he's really quiet lately. You know, he lost his wife a few months ago and he just can't talk right now. And I went, okay. And I was really glad that I didn't follow through on my assumption that it was because he was flying with me, right? So I'm not saying don't stick up for yourself. You should always stick up for yourself, but I would say give people the benefit of the doubt and make sure that they mean to be offensive, or they really need to be kind of educated on what people are capable of before you defend yourself. That makes sense? Yeah.
Okay, our next student is actually our GA for the Career Center, Desiree. I think we all know Des. So Des, do you have a question for Betty?
Yeah, I know you talked a little bit about some of the reactions you've gotten, but what would you say are the top 2 most influential reactions you've gotten, whether they're positive or negative, and how did those make you feel and how did they help you along the way?
Yeah, so the top 2, I'll give you a positive one because a lot of them are kind of negative. But the positive one for me was when I was an instructor at Luke, I actually had 2 women students. It was the first time I'd, basically seen another woman F-16 pilot when they came through training. And I really enjoyed that. And I felt like it gave me the opportunity to be a mentor. And I'm still in touch with both of them today. And we just kind of have unique experiences when you're in that little of a minority. You know, I think it's 3 to 5% of fighter pilots in the Air Force are women. So it was nice to be able to give them some perspective and to give them a role model, if you will, of what you can do if, and you can be accepted in this career field and you can be successful. So I really enjoyed that as a positive experience. And then probably one of the most motivating to me and was, it happens at a Friday night at Oak Club again. Sorry, that's where a lot of stuff happens, I guess, in the Air Force. But we were at Red Flag in Nellis Air Force Base, and Red Flag is the Air Force's premier large force exercise. So there's squadrons from everywhere, right? And at this point, I was very comfortable with my squadron, and we all go to the club on Friday night, and yeah, everybody's staring at me because I'm the only woman in a flight suit, but I don't care because I've got my 20 big brothers, right, from my squadron with me, and I feel comfortable and I feel well protected, and I feel just like I know I fit in even if they don't. Well, one of my friends, he wants to introduce me to a friend of his who's a weapons instructor pilot. So the weapons school is a specialized part at Nellis where they send our best pilots and teach them all the newest tactics, and then they go back to the squadrons and teach us. Well, this guy's an instructor at that school, so he's one of the best F-16 pilots we have. So my friend John, he says, "Hey, Betty, come meet this guy." So I go, "Hey, I'm Betty, how's it going?" And the guy looked at me and looked at my hand and turned around and walked away without a word. And I was kind of not used to that open level of aggression anymore. I'd kind of gotten comfortable. So I'm like, do I want to chase after this guy and tell him he needs to get a grip and figure out what's going on in the late 20th century? And that's when I realized, no, I don't want to. He is not worth my time and energy. There are people out there when you're doing something different. There are people out there that it doesn't matter what you do, what you say, how much you accomplish, you're never, ever going to change their minds, right? So I just go, you know what? I'm not listening to you. You don't matter to me. I'm not letting you inside my head. You're an idiot and I can't help you. And I went back to the people that I liked and liked me and appreciated me and respected me. And I just put that guy away. I'm like, I'm not going to let you bother me. And I'm definitely not going to spend my energy trying to convince you that I belong where I am, because I know I do.
Thank you, Des. And Betty, that by far is my favorite yet. Our next student is Tori.
Hello. So my question is, how did you deal with being told that you just couldn't do something, whether that be mentally or physically?
Yeah, so Tori, that's a good question. I mean, I gave you guys some examples of getting told no and just continuing to try, right? I didn't tell you one of my stories, and it's very based on physicality. I'm short. I'm actually 5'3.5". Well, you have to be 5'4" in the Air Force to be a pilot. So after all this work and all this time to get selected for pilot training, they go and do my physical and I'm not tall enough. Like, you gotta be kidding me, right? I'm 5'4". No, you're 5'3.5". I'm like, So I'm a very stubborn person, if you haven't figured that out yet. I like to say determined, it's a nicer word, but there's a waiver process. So I went through the waiver process and I actually got a flying training waiver to be allowed to go to fly it at 5'3.5" instead of 5'4". But I think the way you deal with it is the way I've dealt with it all the way, regardless of what I was being told no at. I mean, when I was a kid and my mom would say no, and I'd say, well, why? And, because I said so, and that's what moms do sometimes. Well, that's not fair. Well, guess what? Life's not fair, right? I hated that when she told me that when I was younger, but it's kind of true. So if there's rules against whatever you want to do, then you have to find a way around the rules or a way to get the rules changed. But if it's just a person telling you no, then there's a couple different ways around it. You can, I tried to be the best navigator I could be and work hard so that the people that I worked for supported me when I applied to pilot training, right? Or you can go find somebody else to work for that maybe is more supportive. There's all sorts of different ways. It depends on what kind of no you're getting. Is it a rule no or is it a personal no? And then you attack it in different ways, but you don't ever have to accept it long term.
Okay, thank you, Tori. Our next student is Lewis. Do you have a question for Betty?
First, I would like to say thank you for your service. Thank you. You possibly already answered this, but my question is, how is the gender equality in the military, or the equality in general? Is it still like prejudiced and divided, or is it getting better?
No, it's a lot better. It is a lot better. And even when before I went to fly fighters, I didn't feel very much prejudice or very much discrimination. That the military is one of the places in the world, I think, that is very, very performance-based, right? Lewis, if you work for me and you do a good job, then I'm going to make sure you get recognized, right? And you're going to move up. It doesn't matter. We just want to put the best team out there to defend the country, right? So you're always I won't say that nobody in the military has prejudice, because that's not true. You can't say that about any organization in the world, right? And with as many people as we have in the military, you're going to have prejudice. But the system itself doesn't support that, right? It just doesn't. There's so many avenues and channels and places to go if you have something that happened that you don't think is right. I think it's a great place. I mean, if you look at, the current chief of staff of the Air Force is African American. It's the first time we've had, not an old white guy be the chief of staff of the Air Force, but there he is. There's just opportunity to be the best of whatever it is you want to be there. I really think so.
Okay, thank you, Louis. And Celeste, do you want to ask Betty anything before we end this?
I'd actually like to ask a question from the audience. Marie Banks asked, what was your biggest motivator to achieve something that no one has ever done before, even when the studying and training got tough?
Yeah, so one, I don't like being told no or that I don't belong. So I'm going to try hard to prove you wrong, first of all, when you tell me I can't do something. But secondly, it was just something that I truly, truly wanted to do. I was very passionate about it. When I got finally after it took months of academics and simulators before you get your first F-16 flight. And that flight was just amazing. I mean, I pulled out on the runway, I slammed the throttle up to full afterburner, and then I was flying an F-16, and I was just like, this is it. This is what I was meant to do. And no one is ever going to take this away from me. Now, sure, I had my struggles along the way. I mean, I think most of us do, right? But it was well worth all the hard work and effort. And it's just a matter of understanding that everybody gets knocked down sometimes. It's getting back up. Get back up and try again. You're going to get knocked down. If you expect life to go just as smoothly as you possibly want it to be, then it's not going to happen, and you're not going to be able to handle it well when you do get told no. So just work on that resiliency and not giving up on yourself and having confidence, even if you draw it from other people that have confidence in you. Help that build your confidence so you can keep doing what you want to do.
Okay, I think this will conclude this. Oh, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I just want to ask one thing. So I talked a lot about flying in the Air Force, right? Because that's what I did. But that's not all the Air Force is. I mean, the Air Force, I think we're probably 10% of the Air Force is pilots at the most. We have doctors and lawyers and nurses and administrative people and human resource people and IT and cybersecurity and logistics and maintenance and all these different career fields. So no matter, it's like a giant organization or corporation that is self-supportive. So no matter what it is you want to do, you could probably find something close to it in the military if you're looking for a good starting point.
We actually just had a late question pop up.
Okay.
From Charlie Blinn. He said, looking back on your career, if you could do anything different, what would that be?
I would just figure it all out a little sooner. There was that long time period between the press conference and when I finally got to my F-16 training unit was probably about a year. And there was training in between and there was battles in between. And if I would have just figured out sooner that I get to decide who gets inside my head, I get to decide who matters to me and whose opinions I count, and that I don't have the future of women fighter pilots riding on my shoulders, that I can only do what I can do. If I would have figured that out sooner, my life would have been so much better. I mean, I would have been so much less stressed, and that affects my performance, right? So you get in this you can sometimes get in this downward spiral, we call it in flying, where, oh, I'm stressed. I'm really stressed about this. And then I don't do well. And then I'm more stressed. And then I do worse. And you have to find the way to break that cycle, right? And for me, it was just finally going, okay, I don't care what anybody else thinks. I'm going to go out and just do the best I can. And somebody else can figure out if that's good enough. If I would have figured that out sooner, it would have been a lot easier. And I probably would have had a lot easier time at F-16 training. So that's I guess my biggest piece of advice, be you, don't listen to people who don't agree with you, and just don't stress yourself out over what other people think.
I do have one more question from Eden Rice. She asked, how do you balance all aspects of your life, your job, family, relationships, and etc. during your time in the military?
Yeah, so the military can be tough on families. My husband and I, we got married very young. I was still in college when we got married, and we didn't have our son until, I don't know, 15, 16 years after that. So most of the time it was just the two of us. But there are a lot of couples and a lot of families who manage to balance just fine. The key really, I think, is open communication, understanding that there's going to be times when the military has to come first, and there's going to be times when your family has to come first. For me, that kind of came to a point in my last F-16 assignment, my last assignment in the Air Force before I retired. I really wanted to be a squadron commander. To me, that was going to be the epitome of success. To lead a combat-ready F-16 squadron, I was going to be the first woman to do that. And then we moved to South Carolina, and our son got leukemia. Now, he's perfectly fine now. He's a sophomore at the University of Arizona, big and strong and happy and healthy. But at the time, it's cancer, and there's chemotherapy and hair falling out and those kind of things. And so for me, there was no balance anymore, right? I couldn't ever find the time when I should be putting the Air Force first. So I went to my boss and I said, hey, you need to take me out of consideration for that squadron commander position. And he looked at me and said, you're shooting yourself in the foot, right? And I said, yes, I do. Because there was no way I was going to be halfway across the world, leading a combat F-16 squadron while my son was in chemotherapy. So everybody's got to find their balance. I know guys who would have gone in a heartbeat if they could have been a squadron commander, but I chose to reevaluate my goals and my priorities and stay home. And I retired and went to work for Southwest Airlines instead. So, I have a friend who has 2 kids and a PhD, and she was a colonel in the Air Force, and she says there's no such thing as work-life balance, and there kind of isn't. There's you doing the best you can every single day, right? That's what I mean by not having a balance. Is sometimes the Air Force is going to take priority, and sometimes your family will, and you try to make sure that you keep that in sync as best you can. But it's tough, just like it is with any job. I mean, Gary Kelly runs Southwest Airlines. I wonder how his work-life balance is,
I want to add, if any students are watching and you are interested in looking into this further, please contact either myself or Des. Also, I want to thank Betty again, just outstanding, very inspirational as well, and very informative. And I want to thank you, and this will conclude our series for today.
Thank you, Betty. Have a nice day.
Bye now. Thanks.
Thanks, Betty. Bye-bye.